Hello, friends and listeners. In today's episode, we are privileged to welcome our guest, Dr. Leigh DeLyser. She received a PhD in computer science and cognitive psychology with a focus on CS education from Carnegie Mellon University. She has spent her career building the K-12 computer science field. As a founder and an executive director of CSforALL, she oversees programs and strategic planning and supervises research to build support for high-quality CS education at all levels. As a former high school and university CS educator, Leigh understands challenges faced by teachers, administrators, and students developing their competency in the field and accessing high-quality learning opportunities and resources. Her influential Running on Empty report guides policies and research that supports high-quality program implementation. Previously, Leigh was Director of Research and Education at CSNYC, which built a foundation for CS in New York City public schools. Dr. DeLyser, welcome. We are happy to have you on our show. Let's talk computer science.
Thanks, Sandy. It's my favorite topic in the world.
Same here. Yeah, I would also like to talk about this running on empty as well.
Yeah, so that actually was a really big inspiration for my professional journey that took me to this place. So prior to Running on Empty, I was a high school teacher. I taught computer science in a suburban high school in New York State. And I had a huge 40-member robotics team. I had AP computer science. We did lots and lots of great things. And I got this amazing opportunity to go to Carnegie Mellon as a visiting faculty member. I handpicked my replacement, the teacher who was going to come into that school where I was and take over my coursework. She had robotics experience, all of it. But within 6 months of me leaving that school and going to CMU, there was no more computer science in the building. It had completely fallen apart. And so it occurred to me that it's not just about our great teachers doing great things. If we really want computer science to exist for all students, it has to be baked in. It has to be part of the system, right? And so Running on Empty was a first look at the system. We looked at computer science standards in all 50 states. I went through and I read all of the computer science, all of the math, the technology, the science standards, looking for hints that kids were learning computing. And we basically put out a report that said it's missing, completely missing from the standards of how we communicate value in academic subjects to teachers all over the country. And from that moment, from that realization that our systems didn't support the work of our great teachers, I've been working in my career to think about how do we promote systems change to really reach computer science education for all kids across the landscape.
Dr. DeLyser, can you tell me a little bit about CSforALL and your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. Computer Science for All, or CSforALL, is a 501c3 nonprofit. We work specifically in the United States to raise awareness around computer science education, build capacity in communities, school districts, local leaders to implement high quality computer science education in service of increasing access and programs for youth all over the country. And my current role is executive director. And so I get to steer the ship and work with this amazing team every single day who believe so strongly in our mission and are committed to the hard work of doing systems change to make this all go for kids.
So can you talk a little bit about how did all this start? How did CSforALL started?
Yeah, absolutely. Believe it or not, it started with one school. So when I was just about done with my dissertation, I got connected to some folks in New York City who were thinking about starting a brand new high school called the Academy for Software Engineering. a venture capitalist, Fred Wilson, noticed that many of his firms were having trouble hiring high quality computer science talent. And he wanted to build homegrown pipelines for computer scientists who would have grown up in New York, who would feel that it's their home. And then after studying computer science, either at some of the great institutions in New York City or outside, they would come back to New York City and come and work potentially for one of his companies that he supported as a VC. So we launched in 2012 a new school called the Academy for Software Engineering. This was a non-selective public high school, and our student population looked like the city. It was over 90% BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and there was no admissions test. So our students' scores on their 8th grade math assessment also mirrored the larger New York City. But every single student who went to the Academy for Software Engineering took computer science. And it became a rallying cry that all students, no matter who they were, could learn computer science if the curriculum and the pedagogy recognized where they started from and set ambitious goals for them along the way. From that one school, we grew a movement. It turned into a second Academy for Software Engineering in the Bronx, 10 high schools and 10 middle schools with programs launched by the Department of Education. And in 2015, all of our dreams came true as a nonprofit when the mayor of New York City stood up and said, computer science for all will touch every single school in New York City. And that launched a 10-year initiative to bring computer science to every child in New York. And this year, even with the pandemic, we have over 190,000 students enrolled in computer science in New York City because of the program. Now, that work in New York City, right? New York City is not a little place. It's not a one-size-fits-all town. There's so many different things. It's one of the reasons I love New York. It gave us a model for the nation. Because just like New York City isn't a one-size-fits-all town, the United States absolutely is not a one-size-fits-all nation. And so as an organization, we started to think, how can we take the lessons we learned from New York City and grow them into a national movement, right? There was so many great organizations doing work on the ground at that point. There was the National Center for Women in Information Technology. There was Code.org, who was working at state policy efforts and creating momentum with the Hour of Code. There was the work of the ACM and the scientific community who were researching promising practices. There was the work of the College Board and the advanced placement community in pulling together the new advanced placement principles exam. And so all of these actors on the ground, we brought together in a membership model for CSforALL, connected them together and created partnerships that began to work towards change across the nation.
You have mentioned system changes, right? Can you elaborate on that? What kind of system changes are you working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when we hear so much, especially in 2020, about the need to reform our systems, right? But there's very little definition of what a system is. And so systems exist on so many different levels. And in the way we think about systems at CSforALL is we think about them as the institutions, right? The physical, political, structural bodies that people move through. So you can think about a school district, right, as a system. And changing those things are hard, right? They have policies, they have rules, they have fiscal structures, budgets, right? They have restrictions on them based on laws, all of those things to make sure that they serve their communities. But the benefit of those systems is even though they are multifaceted and have all of these different pieces, they are full of decision makers who are human. And so the way that we work to change systems is we try and build awareness and will in those individual leaders within the systems who have decision-making power, help them understand what high-quality computer science education looks like, and then empower them to make decisions that are best for them, their students, and their communities with that knowledge of high quality in mind.
So what do you mean by empowering them?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about, for example, our script program. So at CSforALL, we have a program called Script, where we bring together teams of teachers, instructional staff, librarians, school administrators, superintendents, and they go through a process of self-reflection with some rubrics where they look at, how they're doing as an institution. Do the teachers have high quality professional learning? Do they have a K through 12 pathway for students that builds year on year with curricular topics? Is there communication to parents and community partners about what's going on in computer science education? Do they have a plan even for their district, for where they are and where they're going? We help them think about all of that. And then together, they chart a course. So they make short and long-term goals to improve what's currently going on in their system. So we've worked with schools from all over the nation. Over 600 school districts have gone through Script at this point. And so we worked with one relatively large urban center that when they came to us, they brought a huge team together. And they were critically focused on equity and social justice. As you can imagine, they're an urban center. They have a high student population, especially of Black students who are economically disadvantaged, and wanted to think about how they could make sure the computer science reached all of their schools and not just the one or two that were in the better off neighborhood or were well resourced. And so through the strategic planning process, the teachers and building level administrators in the process talked about the desire to bring that in, which freed up the superintendents and the higher level folks to say, you know what, you guys want this, we're going to support it. We're going to give you the budget for professional development. We're going to make it a mandate to make sure that, for example, every third grade kid would get some computer science in a part of the pathway. And by coming together, the leadership was able to make those decisions based on the recommendations of their instructional staff. And the instructional staff didn't feel like they were fighting or scraping by to get every little thing they needed because they had that decision-making power in the room. And so by bringing together those teams, we're not trying to somehow replace the great work our teachers are doing. We're trying to power them, right? So they don't have to fight the system. I'm sure you've heard this from other guests on your podcast or teachers you talk to, right? They're always saying, like, I have to struggle to try and get this to fit in. We want them to be empowered to have the full weight of the administration behind them as they bring that instruction to students.
Yep. Yes. As you were talking, I'm thinking through all the comments that teachers made and what they have to deal with. The few teachers that I was able to talk to because of the huge shortage in the teachers. Yeah, I'm so glad all the work that you're doing. Otherwise this won't go anywhere, like unless we make it intentional, like you guys are doing. I know, like you guys just got started. It's been 6 years. When do you think CS will be a core course in schools like math and English? I know before that we need to take care of the teachers issue before making that as a mandatory.
Absolutely. I think there are two core requirements, right? In order to get computer science in every single school, in front of every single child. We need our leaders to make it a priority and communicate the value of it to school leaders, right? Until the mayor of New York City stood up and said, computer science will exist in every single building across the city. And it will be a priority. Like, you will be required, and here is why, right? Here's how you're going to report on it. Here's how we're going to check up on you. We're going to help you along the way. Lots and lots of resources is not an unfunded mandate, but we're going to make it a priority. So someone has to give the prioritization of it, because there are so many challenges facing our nation and our schools that computer science education, while many of us think that it can have more impact than just one more subject in a school, right? It can help students come up their economic ladder. It can help communities. It can help schools actually do more high quality instruction in terms of project-based learning and solving real world problems for kids, like all that together.
Right, all that extra effects.
Right. But until it's made a priority clearly by school leaders, or by community leaders, we are going to have to convince school principals and administrators one by one. There are 16,000 school districts in the United States, and many of them are small and rural and are not in urban centers. And so that's a lot of people to convince in a one-off fashion. It would take a long time. So we need that central prioritization. And then to your point, the second piece of it that I think if we really want computer science in every building, every school, in front of every child, we need not only to quote unquote take care of teachers, we need to create a teacher pipeline. Mm-hmm. We need something that not only identifies a school without a teacher and creates a teacher for that school, either by retraining an existing teacher. We need a pipeline. We need a pool of teachers with CS experience that can be hired to be your CS teacher, or when we're graduating our elementary school teachers, every single elementary school teacher who graduates from a degree program should be able to teach age-appropriate computer science content.
For elementary.
Just like they can teach age-appropriate mathematics content, just like they can teach age-appropriate reading. When we get those two pieces in place, then I think we'll have the equation for getting sustainable, rigorous, and equitable computer science education in every school in America.
Right. As you said, like the CSforALL goal is empowering as well. So yeah, right. That falls under empowering. I mean, I could talk on this topic forever, and I'm sure you can as well. So you have touched on a few things, like what do schools need to improve for the K-12 CS education system?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, if we're talking improvement, right? They need partners. They need to not be in this alone. Many of the adults who are the decision makers, the educators in those systems, they themselves never experienced computer science education. They don't have even their own schooling to fall back on, to reflect on, as they're trying to implement this new subject. So they need partnership. They need people who are going to help them. And, we just finished a year with our first cohort of ecosystem projects. And so an ecosystem project is we take a community, the formal education schools and systems and the informal education community around them, the libraries, the out-of-school time providers, the nonprofits in the community, and they come together with a common goal of increasing access for youth. Mm-hmm. And through those partnerships, the teachers gain folks who can help them implement in the classroom. They gain corporate partners that kids can go on field trips, right? They gain this network. Mm-hmm. And the schools, we always talk about our schools needing resources, right? Mm-hmm. But I think if we take it a step further and we talk about partners and collaborators, partners and collaborators bring the resources to the work. And so it's not just on the school to go out and find them or create them on their own, but instead leveraging the resources that are already in their communities through partnership that can really make a big difference.
Yep. Yes. I'm making some notes. You're saying what you're saying is gold. Exactly. Right. So can you brief us a little bit about the state of computer science education in US?
Yeah. So, we are in an inflection point in the United States, I believe. We've reached a landscape point of view where so many of the early adopters have started implementing. Teachers have been empowered to do everything from an hour of code to implement year-long courses. And in so many places, administrators are starting to see the value in computer science education, either from their own learnings or from state policy like state standards that are implemented and are being required of all students. Now the real challenge comes of how do we get past these little bubbles of excellence into true equity? How do we ensure that high quality instruction happens in every community, not just our ones with extra resources? We make sure that the pieces of computer science exist, or the pieces of computer science education exist for children, no matter what zip code they're in, right? And that those pathways are recognized by whatever's next. So if they're CTE pathways, they're recognized by the industry community as entry-level skills for those students. If they are college preparatory pathways, right? How do we ensure that colleges across the United States recognize those pathways as having merit and value to put kids on a starting point for college access and career? And so I think we're in this, like, we've got so much buzz going on and we hear all of these great stories. The next piece of work is to work past the early adopters into the middle and late adopters, and ensure that computer science education permeates completely so that no child by random assignment of teacher or zip code gets left out of this critical subject.
Wow, really good stuff. And like CS is not like any other subject, like there's so much to it. There's immediate jobs connection to it, and the way world is moving, it's all digital. So yeah, I can imagine so much going on for you. So my next question is, currently, how do you think our K-12 CS education is in comparison with the rest of the world?
Yeah. So I think one of the things the rest of the world has going for it is centralization of their education system. It is much easier in the United Kingdom, for example, for them to create a central rule and say, this is the computer science that will be taught across our nation. The United States has a decentralized education environment. There are 50 different descriptions of this is what will be taught in schools, right? So I think in terms of being able to have a nation come together with common understanding of what computer science education is, many of the countries in the world are further ahead than us. But I do think we're further ahead of the world when it comes to equity at the core. We understand here in the United States, in the computer science education community, that equity is a core issue and a core value. Mm-hmm. And that equity comes not only from everybody meeting the minimum standard, but the opportunities to move past it need to exist across every community as well. And so it's not just about every teacher meeting the minimum possible thing that they can do for computer science education. It's about those kids having enrichment opportunities. If we hook them with the computer science bug, right? How does that little girl in 3rd grade then get to go to an after-school robotics program? How does that little boy in 5th grade get to go and build websites or video games? How does that high school teenager get a chance to take a cybersecurity course, if that's something that interests them, or even an advanced placement computer science class? So making sure that we have those core fundamental learning pathways and those out-of-school, after-school activities that lead to interest-driven deep learning is going to be a really important thing that we focus on as a nation, and we work together because we're distributed and everybody's a little different. The other thing I think we have going for us is the notion of partnerships. Our schools are so excited to work together, to learn from each other. And I think that is going to be a big part of how we get to that common understanding that we're unable to do by decree in the United States. So how do we pull everybody together? Communication vehicles like your podcast, all of that getting the word out for what high quality means and how important equity is. All of that is going to bring us to a place where, with common understanding, we can move forward together to get to that kind of distributed implementation.
Yep, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, I never thought about few of the things that you have mentioned, but it makes sense. So what do you think the CS teachers that we have need to make their roles easier?
Yeah, we had a cohort of 8 school districts participating in a year-long project around equity. And these 8 districts applied and were selected because they were a little bit further along in their pathway than some others. And one of the biggest school districts in that cohort was Chicago Public Schools.
I would
And they
imagine.
implemented a graduation requirement for CS education.
Right. This year, right? The first year
Yep.
or next year?
It's
Yeah.
it's been going for a little while now.
Yeah, I think the first graduation students. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been doing a great job. But one of the things they lifted up that was really important was not just messaging, not just like a single decision, but routines. And I think if we think about what high quality education looks like in all of our other disciplines, right? Math, ELA, social studies, science, those teachers meet. They ask themselves, how are we doing and how can we get better? And so the same thing, I think, is useful for teachers in computer science education. How do we build routines that are centered on high quality practice and equity? Because you were a professional engineer. I'm sure it was very useful to you to have colleagues to talk to ask questions, to get advice, to give advice.
Right.
That community participation made you a stronger engineer. It made you a more effective employee, and it made your work better. And so our teachers need those same things. They need those routines. They need those communities. I know you've interviewed Jake Baskin from the Computer Science Teachers Association. Their local chapters are phenomenal.
Yes.
And that community is really what teachers need in order to continue to improve computer science education in the long run.
Yep. It totally makes sense. Yes, they need a thinking partner.
Yeah, we need to, I talked earlier about needing a teacher pipeline. And that teacher pipeline doesn't stop the day they're hired into a school, right? Mm-hmm. We also need the pipeline to continue their advanced learning, to help them get stronger, to build master teachers, right? And have them ready and prepared to take faculty jobs to teach the next generation or to mentor the new teachers who come into their school building. And so we need to build that complete pipeline that includes advanced learning for our teachers.
Yep. So a fun question. So if you have a magic wand to improve the K-12 CS education system, what would the magic wand do?
That's a fun question. I taught a class at New York University called Intro to Computer Science Education in their School of Education. And I used to do a similar assignment with my students. I would say, if you were king of the world, what would you do to solve this problem we were reading about this week? And then after they came up with their big, huge ideas, I'd say, great, you're no longer king of the world. Here's $5,000. Now what can you do to change the world? So I love this game. If I could wave a magic wand and do anything to improve the system as a whole, I would create a shared understanding of what high quality is. I would have us all see the same end goal or finish line. We still hear from many folks who are working in computer science education that one of the biggest barriers is that people label things computer science that are not. For example, a principal might say, oh, we teach computer applications, Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. That's computer science.
Yeah.
A shared understanding of high quality also includes high quality pedagogy and inclusive classroom spaces. Understanding that it's not acceptable for your AP class to be 90% boys. Because if there's a shared understanding about that as not acceptable, then each individual leader or teacher can work to change it if they know the problem exists. And we're a collaborative community who likes to solve problems, right? That's what computer science is. We are the puzzlers, the problem solvers. But I think in order to bring to bear the full weight of the collective intelligence in problem solving, we have to identify the problem we're trying to solve. And so for me, my magic wand would give everybody a shared understanding of what truly high quality and equitable computer science is, so that we could all work together on the same problem.
Yep, that makes so much sense. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. DeLyser. I truly appreciate you coming onto our podcast and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for everything you do. And thank you to your listeners, because I am sure they are in the trenches every day working with students, working with teachers, working with schools, whether they're a parent, a teacher, an administrator, a curriculum writer, all of them are what make this work go. You heard me talk so much about community and partnerships. So I'm so thankful for them, because their work lets our work happen, because we couldn't do it without them. So thank you, and thank your community.